remember the process of actually dying and feeling this light in my forehead, and I feel the souls around me. And they're not happy. Everyone's very serious. There's no reunion. There's nobody there to greet me. And I start to go through basically a life review, and they show me all of my lifetimes. And the overarching theme with me was that I did not live my soul assignment, that I died before I did what I was supposed to do.
I have fantastic news. My intensive 8-week course, Alchemy, is relaunching again in September. I am opening the doors again. In Alchemy, I walk you through the step-by-step process to transform lower base heavy emotions into the gold of heart-opening consciousness expansion. You will learn to live in a state of flow, of giving and receiving abundance, joy, and bliss. Spots are filling up fast, so click here or check the description to have your entire life flipped upside down in the best way imaginable.
I am here today with Mariko, and I am so excited and so looking forward to this conversation because Mariko has in-depth pre-birth and between life and past life memories. She also has a near-death experience. So we're going to start at the beginning and see what we can get into today. She is a visionary and spiritual healer who helps higher realm beings up-level humanity by experiencing their unique soul assignment, light language, and gifts through her signature work, Astral Therapy. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I am so beyond excited to talk to you because you also have pre-birth memories and you also have had an NDE. So I feel like we're going to have the most in-depth and exciting conversation.
Me too. I've been looking forward to this all day. And like you said, I've talked to a lot of people who have had near-death experiences, and I think those are more common now, thankfully, for people to talk about those. But I've spoken to less people who have had pre-birth memories, and so I always get really excited to talk to someone with pre-birth memories.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
So I would love to start by hearing about, your pre-birth memories. It's like a whole topic, huge topic to dive into. But I remember you saying in previous interviews that you've remembered these things all along for your entire life, and you just didn't realize that other people didn't remember those things too.
Yeah, I didn't know. So it's funny to say I remember because remembering sort of implies that I forgot.
Mhm.
But really, it's like I remember it like I remember last Tuesday. Like I just remember I didn't know that we were supposed to forget. I didn't know that people didn't remember everything from before we were born and everything in between lives. And I didn't know that they didn't remember their last lives. And yeah, it wasn't until I was 19 that somebody told me point blank that people don't talk about this and people don't know, remember this. And I was like, oh my gosh. And interestingly enough, I was talking to somebody who was a light being. Like he didn't know it, but I don't know if you're ever around people and they just kind of have a glow about them. And this guy had such a glow of white light. And he was just it came from his heart. And of course, I also had a crush on him. So when he told me that way, people don't talk about this, I was like, okay, well, I better just be normal and not talk about this anymore. But it's funny because of all the clues I had around my life, I just needed that one person to say out loud, "People don't know what you're talking about. They don't remember this." So I think in a way it didn't stifle me. I think it helped me through the next 10 years until I did have a near-death experience. But it clicked for me of like, "Oh, okay." And then it also kind of freaked me out. Like, why am I different, you know?
Yeah, I can imagine going through your entire childhood and young adulthood with these memories and then finding out nobody else remembers these things.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a little I remember that moment like it was yesterday, and I just remember everything clicked, and then it was just not time like, "Oh, I'm not gonna talk about that anymore." And I didn't know what to do with it anyways, I think after that moment. But
Yeah.
interestingly enough, so that was when I was 19, And later, when I was 19, is when I discovered Ram Dass. And that was kind of my first spiritual teacher. So I feel like there was sort of like a closing up of like, don't talk about this now. And then like but you're going to expand and learn about things too, and realize that everything you remember is totally normal. So that was an interesting, I've never thought about that till this moment, but that was an interesting year for me.
Wow, yeah, sounds like it. Okay, so I guess I'd like to start by asking you about your between life memory of directly before this life, coming in from your most recent past
Mhm.
life, if we can use time words,
I
and
know,
what
right?
happened in the in between.
Sure. So when I was, well, since I was born, I've always remembered my first memory doesn't go to childhood. Some people are like, oh, I remember when I was 5, or I don't remember before I was 10 years old, or people have like, they remember, their earliest childhood memories usually start pretty young. And for me, I'm like, I remember being a baby in my crib. I remember before I was born. My earliest memory actually goes back to my last life when I had just been diagnosed and told I was going to die. And I was a man in this life, and it was a long time ago. It was hundreds of years ago, if not 1,000. I don't know. I actually like wish I could talk to a historian and like describe this era and find out when this was, because I've tried to look it up and I don't know enough. But it was back when I know I was in Europe, and I was coming up the stairs to my home, and there was a downstairs and an upstairs, and I was coming up the outside in some wooden steps, and there was a small patio, and then there was a door to get into my house, and there was a downstairs as well, but the upstairs is kind of where I was mostly at. And that was kind of my living quarters now that I think about it, because downstairs, interesting, it's just coming together right now. Downstairs is kind of where I worked. It's where my office was, and it's where I had meetings and stuff. So maybe that's, I don't know. Anyways, so I come upstairs and I'm feeling really upset. And I remember standing at my window, and it was a large, you know, it's really interesting because it probably wasn't that big, but to me at the time, this building that I lived in that was made of stone, brick or stone, it wasn't even brick yet. It was like just stone and wood. To me, felt like I was as modern as somebody standing on a beautiful penthouse in Manhattan. Like it felt so luxury and so modern to me. And I look back and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is so rustic," right? And there was a very narrow street in front of me that people walked by, and there was a guy that I knew who was going home for the day, and he was pushing his cart home. It was probably like it was just before evening, so it was late afternoon, and it was cold enough to have, like, I was cold, but not quite cold enough to have a fire. And I remember, so it was, I don't know what season that would be depending on where I was in the world, but it was just at the turn of the seasons, I would say. And I stood there in my window frozen, not just because it was cold in my room, and I was wearing a linen shirt and brown pants, watching this guy push the leftover vegetables that he didn't sell at the market that day, feeling really jealous, having a total pity party that he was gonna live and I was gonna die. And he had 3 daughters, and I knew where they lived. Like, he was gonna go down the street and turn right and go for a ways and go home. And I was angry, and I was hurt, and I was just completely shocked because I had just been told I was gonna die, and I didn't have that long to live. And at the time, I was a single father, my wife had died, and I had a little girl. I'm not quite sure, because it feels like everyone got older faster then, so I wanna say, like, 12, but for all I know, she was, like, 8. It's like but she just functioned more as, like, a 12 or 13-year-old in today's time, I guess you can say. And so that was one first memory. And so when I look back at, like, when was my very first memory, it's walking up those stairs and feeling like a very modern, wealthy man. And fast forward, I would get sicker, and then I remember the process of being in bed more often than being in bed all the time, and then I remember the process of dying in that life. And my daughter was with me more and more every day. She wouldn't be alone in the world, which was really terrifying for anybody who's a parent to think, okay, you're a single parent and you're dying. I did have a sister in that life, and I knew that she would be taken care of. And I had a lot of friends. So the reason I was having this pity party was that I had this important role in town. And so I don't know what it was called, but I was some sort of city official where if something went wrong, if somebody's farm burned down, I made sure everybody got what they needed in that family. If the last project I worked on was that the windmill had broken and I was the one leading the way, getting the windmill up and running and collaborating, because it wasn't like you just paid the windmill guy to come fix it, right? There was like a big collaboration to get everybody mobilized so that we could fix it. So that was my role in town. And so that's why I was kind of judging this man going, "Wait, you just sell vegetables and you get to live and I have to die." So that was my first moment of my memory of that regret. And moving into the process of death, I remember dying and I remember my friends and family standing behind me and they had moved my bed into kind of the center of the room and my daughter was there holding my hand as if we could just keep holding hands, I couldn't leave, right? Like, she could literally tether me to this world, and it was so intense and so heartbreaking because there was nothing I can do. With all my power in town, with all my authority, there was nothing I could do to, like, live and get better and stay with her, and that was really incredibly heartbreaking for me. And then I remember the process of actually dying and feeling this light in my forehead and starting to feel the process of closing my eyes, having my eyes closed all the time now. And I remember it always just felt very familiar to me. Like it's weird, right? Because here I am dying and I'd been afraid of death before that. Like I was terrified of death. I didn't want to leave. I was fighting to live. I was grieving. I was angry. I was doing all the things that somebody would do when they find out they're going to die at a younger age. And I all of a sudden it was like, "Oh, this is so familiar," and I felt this comfort, like a warm blanket of, "I'm okay. This is totally fine." And I remember taking my last breath, letting go of that world. Nothing hurt. There was no fear. And then I went into my life review, as I'm sure you've interviewed many people who have a life review, and I got to see all the points where, the way I put it is that those moments of decision, and interaction that really matter. Not every time you tied your shoes, but those key moments in life I got to experience. And the overarching theme with me was that I did not live my soul assignment, that I died before I did what I was supposed to do. And the thing is, we're not here to do anything. We're here to be, right? We're here to be. And the thing that they kept showing me over and over was the big part of my soul assignment, like I was very good at doing. I was very good at completing tasks and leading the way and being a leader. I was not good at working for my intuition. And that truly was the missing key to living my soul assignment on a very complete level. Was I would always get these intuitive hits and I would say no. Again and again, they would show me that if I just lived from my heart, lived from my soul, everything would go so much better. And they would show me exponentially, this is in the near death, not near death, but this is in my life review, that things would have gotten like 400 times exponentially better. I would have had more impact on people, the town, everything, had I used my intuition, had I worked from my soul. And so when I understood the importance of living and breathing and working from your soul every moment, and it's so easy on the other side, I was like, "Okay, put me back in, I'll do it." Like, "Sorry, I didn't know, but now I do, put me back in." And that's when they said, "You can't. It's too late. You died, and you'll never be that person again." To which I had the most intense regret you could ever have, I could ever imagine, and there was nothing I can do, I was helpless. And so that was the moment where it was time for me to move on, and I wouldn't go. I wouldn't go. I just stood there in the void. So for me, my actually both, my NDE in this life when I was 29 and then in this death experience, I was in this void of like it was like being in outer space without any planets or stars or anything, but it was just this ever expanding void of love and peace and joy and bliss. So it wasn't actually missing anything, and I think if you did try to put, some lights in there, it would feel like a foreign object. So that's where I was during both experiences. But in this one, I stayed there. I wouldn't leave. I wanted to watch my daughter. I couldn't leave her, she was too young. And so I watched her every day, almost like I was like, like I wasn't a ghost, but I was watching her as if I could stand next to her and I was screaming her name, trying to get her attention. And there were these key moments where it was like she would just feel me and I knew she felt me. And I was like, "Okay, I'm here. We're still connected. We're still connected. We're still doing this. She knows I'm here. She has to know I'm here." And she did. And I think it was a really big comfort to her that I was still with her. And I'd watch her every day and she would cry and she was in bed all the time. And she just had this like pink glow of energy around her. And every day she would just sob and she wasn't living, right? She was just grieving. And then eventually she got to the point where she started living. She started smiling. She started going out. She started getting things done. And she started not needing me anymore. And I was so glad for her, but I was almost stuck of just like engrossed in this movie, so to speak, that I couldn't leave, didn't want to leave. And every once in a while, I don't know what to call them, my guides would come along and say, it's time to go. And I was like, no, no, can't leave this screen. It was like screen time. Can't leave, can't move my eyes from this. And they would kind of come back around and say, come on, it's time to go. And I would say no. And then eventually she started living her life. And I realized I'm just watching her live her life, but she's not trying to connect with me anymore. She's not missing me in the same way. And it's time for me to go live mine. And that's when they were just instantly there. And then it was time for me to go on to the higher realms. And so from there, I found myself in the higher astral realm.
Could I stop you there for a moment and ask you a couple questions?
Yeah,
And
that's
then, of
actually
course,
first time I've shared that whole story.
oh, wow. Thank you so much
Never
for
shared all
sharing.
those details. That was really fun to do. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for sharing. And for the viewers, of course, we'll definitely come back to the experience in the astral realm. But before we get too far, I wanted to ask you about your life. You said that you had died before you completed your soul's assignment. And one of the most common questions that I get from people is, how can I know I'm on my path and how can I know I'm fulfilling my assignment? So,
Yeah.
is it, I mean, how do I want to word this question?
Yeah.
How is it possible, and in your opinion, for us to die without filling our soul's assignment, and how does that change our path? Like, is there something that we can do to make sure that doesn't happen? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It does, and it's so simple. It's just say yes. Just say yes. I said no, and I've had a lot of people misunderstand this message and get kind of angry or get kind of upset. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I didn't miss it. I said no, emphatic, no way, F that, never gonna happen. It wasn't like it passed through me and I was like, oh, I missed it. No, I was like, hell no, I'm doing that. No, stop asking, never gonna happen, right? I had this emphatic, I will never do that. Stop asking me. No. So now, how do we live our assignment? First of all, the only assignment is enlightenment, right? Oneness consciousness. That's all we're here to do is to be the greatest expression of our soul, connected with oneness consciousness, God consciousness, however you express that, Christ consciousness, Buddha consciousness, whatever that is for you. That's what we're here to do. How do we do that? You just keep saying yes to living through your soul, or allowing your soul to express through you truth, love, peace, joy, everything that you truly are. So we complicate things because we think that we're here to, when I say soul assignment, it feels like we're here to do something, like get a job and do something, or create a business and do something. And I do believe that that's secondary, because I don't know anybody who doesn't have a water bill, or, a bill for food. I mean, we do get to, but the way I look at it is, with that expression, how can you then create an income through your expression, your unique soul blueprint, instead of doing a side job and doing something that, feels like it's sucking your soul, meanwhile trying to enlighten and be authentic here. And I think that's what we've done for a long time in society. We have these jobs, we go to school, we get a job, but it's like living parallel to what your soul is here to express. And I feel like that's happened a lot. And I've spoken to a lot of people that feel that way. And I feel like it's time to blend that together. So we can get to that later. But how do we know we're living our soul assignment? You're saying yes to your own soul. You're saying yes to love. You're saying yes when that feeling wells up. And there's also a surrender, right? Because the yes is like signing a contract that you haven't read, because it's a blank contract with the universe. And the yes is, whatever my greatest expression is, yes. Now You say yes without resistance, without saying no, without push, like me, firsthand experience, without doing all that. Watch how your life starts to expand and change and grow. Watch how you start to expand because you're saying, yes, I will live my soul assignment without the worry of, well, what is that going to look like? Well, I mean, how much am I going to make? Well, how is this going to start? Well, I don't understand how. So without second guessing the how, because that's what we want, we're human, we can't help ourselves, right? But how is this going to happen? I get it. But that's not the question. It's a statement, full sentence, stop. Yes.
I love that so much.
It's hard, right? Because here you are. We can say you're living the assignment on your soul. You said yes to this podcast. You said yes to whatever's coming your way, but there was no guarantee it was me successful. There was no guarantee anyone was going to listen to it, but you said yes first. And that's the key for people. You say yes unequivocally without this like subcontract going, well, okay, but only if, only if it works out, only if I get everything I want. You just say yes. Yeah, it's easy. And it's the hardest thing you'll ever do.
Interestingly, since you mentioned my podcast, I've had a very similar message communicated to me about my purpose, which is that my actual purpose in life is about anchoring energy, like alchemizing energy. Like, you know how people say that the best thing we can do for the collective is to work on our own spiritual evolution, because then we can bring in a higher state of consciousness that helps the collective. And then I was told everything that you're doing with your podcast is secondary to that. That's your choice. That's my choice, or whoever's choice, how you want to choose to bring that in and express creatively in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's like you're saying, it's an alone journey. We're all here responsible for our own consciousness, and we get to choose every day if we're going to be aligned with our soul or not. And then from that, what do you want to birth from that? Who do you want to be from that? And then the being who you're being because of who you are as the soul, because you're allowing that expression to come through you, almost births your podcast. And then from the birthing of the podcast comes this deeper work. Right. And so it's like a ladder or a trail or stepping stones. And you just keep saying yes. And the next thing unfolds. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like it's totally flipped from how we think that things work in like third density physical consciousness. Like instead of going out and working and trying to make something happen and be successful and hit all of these goals and achievements, it's like, no, just surrender to your highest joy and what your soul is telling you that you're here to do, and express that, and then everything else follows.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always been there. I think that's the thing. Everyone's searching like it's going to happen tomorrow but it's like here now. And that's where time gets really confusing because we believe that we live in linear time and we actually don't. So it's you can be all of this right now. Everything we're talking about sounds like it could take you 5 years, but it's like, no, this is all right now.
Just a shift in awareness.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to your story. You were moving into the astral realm, and what happened there?
So I found myself in this light, again, just this really bright light, like a thick, warm, gelatinous light. I say gelatinous because it feels thick, not because it actually felt gelatinous, but it was like a thick cloud of light, of just this bright, bright white light. And I was just kind of frozen there in joy and bliss and love and just existence, right? Without time. And then I realized, oh, I have to open my eyes. Oh, and it was like a memory, like, oh yeah. And so I remembered I have to open my spiritual eye though, right? Because I don't have the human body anymore in the same way. Similar shape, but not the same way. So I opened my spiritual eye, and then this whole world comes alive around me. And it was just home. So it wasn't it's funny because we haven't talked about the NDE of just being in oneness consciousness, which is our true home, where there is no body and it's just ever expanding love, right? consciousness, oneness. But in this realm that I was in is where the world is made of light. And it's what I think some people go when they have an NDE or they experience as what they would call heaven, where they see their friends and family, there is that reunion, and there's nothing but love and joy. I won't say nothing but, because there's actually emotion there, feelings. So feelings aren't only positive. But in that moment, I open my eyes, I kind of look and I see that my body's made of light. I see this emerald green grass underneath my feet. And I'm just like, oh yeah, like everything's like a awesome here. Right. I don't know what I was so worried about. Right. Like, oh, right. And I look and there's just this beautiful scenery of nature all around me and everything's made of light. The river flowing next to me, the water is made of light, the flowers are made of light. I have this epiphany that we only see half the rainbow on earth and the other half of the spectrum of colors is here. Can't tell you what they're called because we don't have a word for them in the human language, but just all these realizations and memories of like, I knew that. I knew that. I can't believe I forgot. And I lived there for a whole lifetime. I had a whole lifetime there. So people often want to know, do you see your loved ones? Yes. The first thing I did was I got to see my loved ones. In fact, it was like almost the closest person on out. So the first person I got to see was my wife, who had, because I was a man in that life and I died. And so I got to see her and then other friends and family. And then not just from that life, but from other lives. And it was all these important people who had played roles in my lives, including animals who I'd been close to. And I got to see one particular animal who came to visit who was in a human form at that point, but had been in one life my cat and in a previous life my horse. And we just recognized, it was the sweetest reunion. I think that soul was going to move on to be human in the next life, which I'll get to later. But we got this whole reunion. And then I had a bit of a nap. Some people, I think I've heard it called the death sleep, where in between lives you can sleep. And some people sleep for most of it. Some people sleep for none of it. I think the higher consciousness, the highest conscious people, they don't sleep in between lives. They just go and just keep working. But I definitely took a nap and it was truly the most epic nap ever. And while I was sleeping, I found this meadow that I went into and just laid on the grass, flowers all around me, trees around me, this oval meadow, and I took a nap. And my spiritual teacher would come once in a while to see, are you up yet? And I was like, no, 5 more minutes. Like 5 more minutes could be like 10 months in human terms. Like, I don't know how long, because we're not experiencing finite time anymore. It's different, even though there sort of was interesting. It was like experiencing time in one sense, but also having that feeling within you that you're infinite, but experiencing different days while knowing like in my body having infinite time. I don't know if that can, like, if that translates.
Yeah.
That's what it was like. And so every day I slept. And then finally, my teacher, who in that realm was male, came and said, are you ready? And I was like, yes. And there was just some teachings that I got while I was there. And I don't remember. It was like a, I can't explain it. Like, it wasn't like a class I went to. It was just sort of always there. Like, I'm in the teachings now. I can say that. Like, I'm inside of them. Not that we like did this thing, but like, okay, I'm ready. And I remember having a role there as a healer. And I would go to my meadow and people would come with emotional stuff they had to let go of. And they would lie down and I would heal and help them let go. And I remember there was a group of souls that I really wanted to hang out with, very high conscious group of souls. And they would sit by the river every day and talk and just have these really incredible elevated conversations. And I wanted to be a part of it, but I didn't have the consciousness to be able to go over there yet. And I saw the people that were basically more normal, average souls, and I didn't really want to hang out with them either. And so I just hung out in my meadow and meditated and tried to connect with a higher consciousness, tried to connect with source, which it's the only thing to do, right? Once you leave this world, you realize that's all there is to do, is to connect back to your truth. So I spent every day doing that. Occasionally I would get hungry, but not hungry because I didn't have like a physical body, but it was almost like my energy would get low and immediately I could pick astral fruit from a tree and eat it and feel nourished. Or all of a sudden in my hand, there would be this like astral drink. As soon as I felt like and thought I'm hungry, hungry is not the right word and drained is not the right word, but I was just in need of rejuvenating because it wasn't like I would die if I didn't eat. So I would have this astral nectar, so to speak, and I would drink it and then the cup would disappear. So it was like, as we needed something, we can just call it into existence. And then my energy would be like, "Vroom," and then I would feel like, okay, again, for a long time. It wasn't something I did every day. And eventually I got to the point where I could visit these people and became part of their group and had a tremendous time with them. And I was able to travel to higher realms because this was the astral realm. So in my experience, Earth is like a C average planet, right? So there's A, B, C, D, E, F, right? And actually, I think even above A. Earth is like very average. We're very C average. So the astral world is like one above that. And then there's even higher realms above that. So I could go to these higher realms, but I couldn't live there. But I was able to go there, travel there. And that was all during this time that I was hanging out with these souls and just thinking that I was getting more enlightened, right? And then one day I kept noticing that people would leave this circle. And I was like, why would you leave? Like, this is such a sacred community, a sacred circle that we've created in order to enlighten. And then it hit me that I was playing the role of a spiritual person and I was not, in fact, enlightening. I was just playing a role and that I wasn't here to play any more roles. I was here to shed identity. And so eventually I left that group too, went back to my meadow and just meditated. And we wouldn't, meditation is not even the right word. It was really just like connecting with the highest, connecting with God on the deepest level that I could. And that's all I did from then on. And then eventually I was able to go into an even higher realm. There was a bit of a celebration. There was a lot of people around. My teacher was there, my husband, my child, who the child who the soul who was going to play the role of my child in this life was there. And we did adopt our little girl from India about 2.5 years ago. And it was like, there she is. Everything kind of came together. And I went into what's called the causal realm. And the causal realm is a non-physical realm made of light. Actually, I shouldn't say it's made of light. It's a realm of thought and idea. And the only body I had was a body of light. And it wasn't a physical where you could say I have arms and legs. It was like being a ball of light. And I was a purple light. And there were other lights around me. And there were just souls working out some of them were working out their stuff. And then there was this how did I describe them? I call them like ancient grove of trees. Like there were these souls that lived there all the time and they weren't just stopping by. They lived there and they were creating their own worlds. So this realm is where ideas originate. So it's where ideas originate. And then we kind of have it downloads from our causal body to our astral body and then the physical realm. And then we have an idea of like a cell phone or the idea of creating a country like America, right, was born. Different ideas, big ideas, small ideas, all of it come from the causal realm. And so from there I don't know if you want me to go into this huge experience that I had there.
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of a big one. So I'm there and I realize this is not a happy place. I realized this is not happy sad. The astral realm, like I kind of got in my groove and I was very human there. I was acting very human, right? Like, hey, it's so good to see, reuniting with people that I didn't get along with so well in my last life or previous life. There was just a deep respect and understanding that we went through some sort of lesson together. But in general, it was very similar to Earth, only it was made of light and people were higher beings. So there wasn't all the bad stuff happening, right? But as far as like it was more similar to Earth than anything else I experienced. So from there, I go on to the causal realm where there's no planet. It's just like being in outer space, only you're in a realm. You just know it, but I can't tell you how you know it. You just do. And I get there and everyone's very serious. There's no reunion. There's nobody there to greet me. There's nothing. I'm just like in this light, all of a sudden, this body of light. And I start to feel the souls around me and they're not happy. And I was like, where am I? And I start to go through basically a life review and they show me all of my lifetimes of everything from how we move from creation to the essence from the moment that you are created, which is interesting because we're never not created in some so the moment that we're separate, the moment that we experience separateness and the ways that I got to see the world, because we're all one. So I got to see the plant kingdom and live that. I got to see and live in the insect kingdom and had lifetimes being an insect. I had lifetimes from then moving on. Again, it feels linear. It's not. Experiencing the animal kingdom and getting to experience myself as different animals. And that was actually a lot of fun. I remember, again, my first experience actually was in the plant kingdom, but there's not much to say about that. But the insect kingdom and then the animal kingdom was a lot of fun. And I was little animals, like, where I was like I don't know what I was, because it's not like, a deer's not going around going, "I'm a deer," like, "Look at me." You just are. They're actually very in tune. So I was like little animals that burrowed in the ground, and I was bigger animals. And I remember just like foraging for food, and everything was like a built-in GPS where I just knew where to find everything. I just knew what to do. And then I'd hear something and I'd go running. And sometimes I would go running and everything was fine. And sometimes I would go running and lights out, like, oops, something caught me. I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel fear in the way that we might feel fear getting chased down an alley. It was just like, and then lights out. And then I would reincarnate as a different animal. And sometimes I was really bad at it in the beginning. Like, I just didn't get out of there fast enough. And then I got better at it, which was kind of funny. And my last life before incarnating as a human was as a wolf. And I had my family, and wolves live as families. I mean, speaking from firsthand experience, they live as a family unit, which always kills me when I hear about people killing wolves, because it's like killing a family. And we operated different than a human family. We operated as if we were one body. So you can't just lose one. And I had my role. And then there was a point where it was time for me to go. And I remember just walking off. Uh, I just walked away. Like, it was snowing outside, and it was time for me to go. And I think that was when I sort of died. And then I came back and I was a human. I was a man, boy, living on a farm. Very slow. I couldn't process the way that humans processed. I was very slow. I couldn't have complicated conversations. I couldn't have a complicated job. I was like big and strong, so I would like move heavy objects. And that was my role. And I lived with my parents. And that was my first lifetime as a human.
Wow.
Oh, but there's so much more that happened in between that. I sort of skipped over this whole thing. Yeah, I don't know if we have time to go into there's so much more, but
I have time. How are you doing on time?
I'm like, "Oh, I went through the incarnations, but I skipped over this whole thing." So I experienced myself in all these incarnations. And then I start screaming that I want the higher teachings. They start showing me, I don't know how to explain this. It's like, I'm going to use outer space as a very tiny, misleading, wrong example, but it's the only human language I have to explain this. Okay. So imagine being in outer space. There's no stars, there's no planets, and you're watching all the stars and planets. So like, I'm watching the universe and I'm seeing everything that's been created in this world. There's other worlds too, by the way. Like, this isn't the only realm, and there are other life forms on other realms. And so I'm watching all of that play out. And I would kind of zoom in on somebody on like Earth or something, or sometimes a different planet, honestly. And I would zoom in and watch their whole life. And it's funny because now I'm like, I wonder if they think I was their spirit guide or something watching over them. Because I would try to do something to help sometimes. And I would do that a lot. And then I saw the only thing that ever mattered to me. I saw people go from living a normal life to full enlightenment in one lifetime.
Oh, wow.
I didn't see it a lot, but I saw it. Once I saw it, I was like, that's what I want. That's it. That's the only desire I have. And I started screaming. Again, I don't have a body, so I can't say I'm screaming with my voice, but I was screaming with my consciousness. I want the higher teachings. I want the higher teachings. That's all I wanted. I realized that's the only thing worthy of wanting. It's the only desire worth having anymore. I want the higher teachings. And I'm screaming and screaming and screaming this. And then I got to experience, I don't know what to call this because I don't want anyone to feel like it's like bad, but I got to go through what I guess I can call a purification process, where I got to go through and burn up everything that was not aligned with me anymore. But without going through, it's interesting because I want to say it's like burning up karma, and yet you and I both know karma is not real.
Right.
But in the separateness, it's very real. right? In the duality, we experience it. We experience happy, sad, good, bad. We experience all the opposites. So I got to go through and almost burn up everything that I had done in other lives where I was, an ass, basically, where I was not aligned with my soul. And I got to go through all of it and see every single lifetime that I had and burn up everything that wasn't pure. And I remember feeling like I was on fire, but I didn't want it to stop. I mean, I wanted it to stop, but I didn't. That sounds kind of strange, but it was like I wanted the process. The process is not fun, but don't put me out of it early because I want to do this. So at the end of that process is when I would sort of peek out of not that I could peek, again, these human words, it's funny, but I'd sort of look up like, am I done yet? Nope, not done. Done yet? Are we close? Nope, not even close. And then when I was done, there was just infinite bliss. And I found myself soaring in the infinite ocean of God. And I got to experience the universe. And I got to experience the song of the universe, the music, the light languages of all the frequencies everywhere, all the higher frequencies. And it was like a choir singing, chanting in every light language frequency. And I got to experience the song, the music. I don't know what it is. I've heard it here too. We'll call it music. And I got to experience everything. I was one with the universe. There was no more separateness. So every answer that I would want, every question anyone could have, it was all there and it's always been there. And then that's the secret, isn't it? It's still here. It's all still in us.
Yeah.
And so we don't have to wait for information. You just have to connect with it. And it's faster than a download. We use the word download a lot, but it's actually just this knowing that's always been there. It can't be anywhere else. So I got to experience that ocean of infinite bliss and not experience it outside of myself, but be it. Be in that oneness God consciousness. Be one with it. And that went on for, infinite time. So it's like forever, right? And then there was a moment where I started to feel so much love. And I just felt so much love. I was like, wow, there's so much love. There's so much love in my heart. And then I realized there's a location. I have a heart. Oh my gosh, I'm back. I have a physical body. And that was when I realized I was a baby in this life. And I was like, I have fingers and, discovering my body, like fingers and toes. And I'm a person again. I'm human. I'm back. And even I would cry, if I needed my diaper changed, if I was uncomfortable, if I wanted hugs or whatever, food. And sometimes the crying, though, I was just in bliss when I was crying as a baby. And a lot of times I would just go back into the causal realm because that was really home for me. And it still is. So when I was just lying peacefully or sleeping, I would just be back in the higher causal realm. And then this was really the dream. So that's how I spent my early infancy and baby time.
Thank you so much for sharing. Wow. I have so many questions.
I feel like I may have it may be disjointed, but it's
Not at
in my
all.
book, but I try on podcasts to give everything I can on a podcast. So you don't necessarily have to have my book, but there is a little more in my book. But yeah, it's interesting, right? Because this is the dream.
So, okay, let's go back to when you were in the astral realm. I have a question about that group of people who were at a certain state of consciousness that you wanted to join in on, but you couldn't because you hadn't reached that state of consciousness yet. But then when you got there, you realized that they were playing a story of being spiritual. So, what is the difference between what they were doing and then what you did on your own, just connecting directly to source to advance spiritually?
Well, I think, that is what we were talking about earlier. I think maybe before you hit record, but we're talking about just raising the collective, right? So the first step, or maybe this was recorded, maybe during the first step is raising the individual vibration. That's really what we're doing, is connecting ourselves to God consciousness, reconnecting. We're not even disconnected. So it's a remembering because we feel disconnected, but we're actually not. We can't be. It's like it'd be as hard as like, flying off the earth. It's like gravity holds us here. We can't just fly off the earth. We can't be separate from God consciousness. It's not possible. So I think what I was doing was recognizing that I didn't want to go play a human role and have these human interactions because that's not what I was here for. And when I caught myself doing that, well, that's a very normal human thing to do. Ultimate reality is we're not human. While we can come and play the role of a human, we are the soul. And it was time for me to start behaving like one. And the soul is one with God consciousness. The soul doesn't have a need or desires. The soul doesn't need friends because we're one with everything. But I started to play and interact like a human because that was what I was used to. And then I realized that's not what I'm here for, though. So, and it's interesting because we keep coming back to this planet, Earth, where we have to play the role of a human and we do need each other, right? I mean, we have at the very base of our brain, we have this tribal mentality of we need each other to survive, right? Our inner Cro-Magnon, our inner Neanderthal, like we need people to survive. And so that's kind of built into us. And at the same time, we're one. And so I think in that moment, I was realizing that I was choosing oneness consciousness over playing the role of a person.
Okay, that's really interesting. So in the astral realm, this group of people was playing the role of a human and like looking to get something out of the group that they thought they couldn't have on their own.
Well, I think it's natural. I think we want both, right?
Mhm.
Like we want friendships, we want community, but ultimate reality is it's enlightenment is an alone process. You're not necessarily enlightening with like 20 other people at the same time. They can't help you remember who you are on a level so deep that it becomes unshakable and that you go into samadhi. If that were the case, it would have worked by now. It's not.
True.
It's people who have had an experience of samadhi, which I actually did in my early 20s, or people who have come into enlightenment. We think of like Eckhart Tolle. He wasn't surrounded by people helping him enlighten. It just happened. Same thing with me. It just happened. I didn't know what was happening. No one told me. And that is the process of coming back into oneness consciousness, or people that have NDEs, right? It just it's like a unveiling, like, oh, of course it was always there. And I think that we tend to want to have these supportive conversations. And I think they're important while we're on earth. I'm all about community, but I'm also all about the individual owning who you really are and going for it.
Right. Okay, that leads to my next question. When you were in the causal realm, you were observing different lifetimes on Earth, you saw some people who went from living a normal life to full enlightenment in one lifetime. Were you shown how that can happen?
I think that was, I mean, no, well, yes, because you don't, yeah. Did I come back with language of how that happens?
That's a different story.
I'm like, yeah, of course, you know. You want to explain it? You want to take it from here? It's so funny because we don't have the language. It really comes down to, again, I think that the because I did get downloaded, saying yes is the easiest thing I keep getting over and over from the universe because I get asked that question a lot. How say yes? Because it's like the universe is pushing, like, come on, we got this. And we're like, la la la. And as soon as you turn back toward the universe and go, yes, the universe is all in on you. So it's this surrendering, a decision, an okay, I'm signing this blank contract with the universe to say yes to my highest good, my soul. And from there, we'll see what happens. But that yes implies a surrender and a unconditional yes. And I think that's really the root of the how. Because as long as you've got conditions, you're not going to get there.
So,
And then
like all the sages have said, in order to become enlightened, you have to want it more than anything.
anything else. Yeah, more than your bad habits. So then that becomes like, okay, well, what do I do to say yes? Well, put down your bad habits. Stop hanging out with people who are rolling downhill because it's really easy to roll downhill. Start climbing uphill. And you'll find that the higher you go up the hill, the less people there are because it's hard. because it's not as fun, because it's no longer a group activity, because it's hard and there's less people doing it. And then it becomes a very individual process, a quiet process.
Right. Okay, yeah, so that goes right back to what we were talking about previously about enlightenment being an individual journey.
Yeah. I think it's important though, like I said, you wanna hang out with people who are going up that hill too, but you don't wanna be dependent on them, like, "Oh, if so and so enlightens, and I will too." No, it's you're not gonna get it by osmosis. Like, you've gotta put in the I guess you can say put in the time, meaning make this time here on earth count. Don't get caught up in things that don't matter. And is it okay to have some fun sometimes? Yeah, of course, have fun. Enjoy your life, but know where you're going. Know where the endpoint is, like a GPS, right? You don't just get in the car and drive somewhere new. We generally have a GPS that tells us where we're going. We have to know this is basically my endpoint. And then every decision you're making, is this getting me toward my endpoint or is this pulling me away? Am I going in a different direction? Everything you're doing, from the food you eat to the people you hang out with, to the thoughts you allow in your head, to the bad habits you allow in your life, is this getting me closer to the truth of who I am as a soul? Or is this pulling me away and is this just kind of entertaining? And sometimes it's entertaining. Sometimes I pick up a book that's funny and it's not making me more enlightened, but it's really fun. I watched a movie last night with my husband and it was so funny, but it was like one of those painful, funny movies. And I was like, this is so, like, I could barely get through it. It was so painful. Is that making me more enlightened? No, but I'm human and I get to enjoy a funny movie once in a while.
Right.
It's okay to be human, just don't believe it.
Right.
You know? Yeah. But in that circle of friends, I was really believing that I had this role. I was really believing the story. I was believing that that was helping somehow, and it wasn't.
Mm. I think that's something that people fall into in this life too, and I've heard it called the spiritual ego. When somebody becomes aware that they're on a spiritual path and they are more than their bodies and they want to reach enlightenment or whatever terminology, and then that becomes their identity.
Oh, it's so funny too. It's so beautiful. When that first happens, I always say, you know, when that happens, the ego wants to take your soul shopping, and all of a sudden you've got crystals and you've got singing bowls.
Yep.
Go shopping. I've got new friends, I've got new clothes, I've got all the things, and it's just part of it, you know, better than some of the bad habits that we've seen in the past and that we see now.
True.
And I think it's part of it. You're changing your identity, you're changing your lifestyle. But yeah, it does involve like kind of a shopping spree, which is kind of funny. And it's beautiful and it's perfect. And you know, I think that you get to do that and not judge and then go, all right, so my ego is excited about this, but you don't want your ego to take over. And that's where it gets dangerous, is when your ego is like, I'm so enlightened, this is who I am. And then you start getting superior to other people because you're so enlightened. And those people are way too enlightened for me to hang out with. So I don't, because we're all one. So it's like, there is no one else. But sometimes those people get spiritually competitive. And that's something to just avoid within yourself, within others.
Right. Okay, so I'm an animal lover, so I have to ask you, you mentioned there was a soul that you saw in the astral realm that was a cat and a horse in different lifetimes. And then you mentioned that they moved on to be a human and that there was more to that story.
Yeah, well, I think so. Well, more to the story was me telling you how the transition goes from plant to insect to animal to human. So I believe that as those souls become more enlightened, I mean, my last dog, he was actually a wolf hybrid. He was so human. It was weird. And I'm like, I bet he's going to be human in his next life after he passed away or very soon. He was just so human. And I think that they do. And then, you know, so I feel like horses, cats, dogs, like they could get to be very, I think monkeys, some of them get to be very human. Not that being human is better. It's not better. It's just more evolved in some ways because we have a different speech and language. We have hands, we have thumbs. Sometimes I think dolphins are probably more evolved than we are, you know, when you really look at things. I don't want to say more evolved is better, but we do have, I will say we have the capacity for enlightenment in the way that a cat or dog does not. We have the passion and and the drive for enlightenment in the way that we don't, or I did not, living in the animal kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Say evolving in that way biologically is better. It's just our evolution of our consciousness is more capable in the human realm.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I've heard some past life regressionists and like different models of spiritual evolution that I've studied have talked about how consciousness evolves through the simpler life forms, up through the animals, up to the human, because as humans we have self-awareness. So it sounds like what you were describing when you were the wolf and the different animal forms is maybe more of like, would you agree with this, that you were more just in the present moment, living on instinct and not like analyzing and thinking about things like we do as humans?
Definitely up until my wolf life. A little more human in my wolf. It's
Really?
interesting because I was not around humans. In fact, I would see people go by that I honestly, they were like nomadic. I mean, I honestly wonder if this was so long ago that I was watching like Cro-Magnon people walk by or Neanderthal people walk
Wow.
by because they were really short and they always had like big, not always, but a lot of times they had coats and backpacks or they were carrying a lot of things. And they knew we were there and I knew they were there, but we never, ever crossed paths. They were never trying to come pet me. I was not a pet. And I wouldn't see them very often. And but in that role that I had as a wolf, I knew my job. I was sort of like, I don't know if it was, I don't know much about, I should learn about wolves, but I was like almost like second in command. Like I wasn't the alpha, but I was like the police. I was the one that enforced the rules. If somebody got out of line, I was big and strong and I enforced all of the rules, but I was not the alpha. And there was a consciousness. It wasn't only being in the moment because there was so much love. Like they were my family, not like being a squirrel or a deer. The wolf pack was my family, and we interacted as if we were one body. Like I was one leg and another wolf was another leg. Like we were one body and we really needed each other. So there was more consciousness and more friendliness and more playfulness, more love, more appreciation even for nature. I remember one morning I woke up, or maybe it was when I was first born, and there was snow under my paws. And I was just like, I love it. I loved the
Wow.
cold. I loved the crunch of the sound under my paws. Yeah. There was more of there was self-identity, not to the extent that I have now or that I had as a human, but there was, I am me. This is my family. And we hunt together and we work together. If you break a rule, you're going to hear from it. I still love you. You're still part of the pack. That's more human than a squirrel or a
Right.
bug, right? So there's a lot of consciousness in the wolf pack in my experience of remembering being in that. More than I was a bird too. That was so much fun. Oh my gosh. But there was no consciousness beyond GPS of like seeing something move and going for it and getting it. There
Mm.
wasn't as much thought. There was no connection to the other birds in my nest. None. And when we're gone. I never saw them again. I mated, I had more eggs, they grew, but there was never that cohesive feeling that this is my family.
Mm.
That was in the wolf pack.
That's fascinating. And if wolves are developing a self-awareness and can experience bonds and love with their family, it just like imagine how much consciousness a dog or a cat would have.
Oh, and my gosh, that's why they live with us. I mean,
Right.
they're pets, right? We treat them. I mean, my gosh, look at them. They have like there's a baby section at the pet stores for like puppies and kittens now. I mean, they
Right.
have clothing, they have everything. Yeah, I mean, they definitely have become part of our families. Yeah,
Mm.
they. I think. I mean, I think we've all run into some dogs that like, okay, you're kind of dense, but there's sometimes just a special dog or cat or animal that we run across that's just so human.
Mhm.
I don't know that it's every dog out there. I don't think so at all. It could be somebody's first lifetime as a dog. It could be somebody's last lifetime.
Yeah, I had a cat like that that recently passed, and this cat, the connection that I had with that cat was deeper than the connection I've had with most humans, and I don't know. It's it's just really interesting to me to think about how consciousness evolves and how, historically we've thought as humans that we are better or higher than the animals and we can do whatever we want to them, but that's not the case at all.
No, like I said, we have the capacity for enlightenment, but I don't know that we're always more intelligent.
Right.
Done, So I don't know. I think we help animals evolve.
Mm,
I think that in some ways, the way that we allow them to be more human and to acknowledge their emotions and all that, I think we actually can. I shouldn't say we all do, but I think it's possible that we help them evolve.
hmm All right. Well, thank you so much for being willing to have this conversation. We could talk for twice as long, but I'd like to give you a chance to share with the viewers about your book and your YouTube and anything else that you have going on.
Okay, sure. So I have a YouTube channel, Mariko Frederick TV. I have Instagram at Mariko Frederick. I have a private Facebook group where I think I gave you the link for that. And then I do have a book called Soul Priority. It's on Amazon. I did go over a lot of it here. So, because I don't know how to hold back. People ask me stuff on podcasts. My book is a short read, it'll probably take you 2 hours to get through it, but it is available on Amazon. And I have another one coming out in 2025 that I'm working on right now.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'm excited about that one, and those are the most places to find me. And then I also, for anybody who wants to experience going into the higher realms, I developed my own modality called astral therapy, where I take you in a guided experience into the higher realms. And so I have a free one to help you find your purpose and clear anything blocking you. And that one's on my website, soulpriority.com.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'll have those links in the show notes. And one final question. I ask a lot of my guests this, and I would love to hear your answer from your unique perspective of remembering so many previous lifetimes. What are we doing here, and what's the purpose of these lifetimes?
It's interesting. When I had my near death experience in this lifetime, when I realized when they told me I had to go back, they said, "Remember who you are. Go back and help people. Remember who you are." And I think that's really all we're here to do. Remember who you are. And once you do, you go back and help people. I think that message was not just for me. I think it was for humanity. I think that we are here for oneness consciousness, for enlightenment. And I think that we overcomplicate it. I think we pressure ourselves. And I think that we make it more complicated than it is because the answer is already inside of you, and the answer is you. And so when you just think of all I have to do is remember who I am, how do I do that? Say yes. That's it. I feel like the languaging and what, if you and I were to try to explain all of the downloads we've gotten, we don't have enough human words. And yet the truth is always simple. Remember who you are and say yes. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't pressure yourself. You're doing great. Be the greatest expression of you. And if something wants to get birthed out of you, go birth it. Don't worry it to death. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so much fun.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most fun conversations I've had.
Me too.
Thank you for watching and listening. Your views, likes, comments, and shares truly make the biggest difference in supporting this channel. Don't forget to check the show notes for all the links to today's guest, as well as my links. You'll find me on social media at Love Covered Life, my website, lovecoveredlife.com, and the Be a Guest link for anybody who would like to be a guest on the channel. I have great news. Love Covered Life podcast is coming available on audio podcast. You can find it wherever you listen to your audio podcasts.